Welcome and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. This is our first time using our GoToWebinar and our first time actually meeting as a task force since January of this year. And it's almost fall, so we've had a lot of time. And of course, this is just one other thing of the pandemic. It's kept us from actually being together, but it's not kept us from continuing to work on safety for our roadways here in the county. So I appreciate everybody. We just want to share with you some new initiatives today and continue to stay in touch with everyone. Just trying to work this slide, my slide presentation. So bear with me for 1 minute. There's a few ground rules. If you're not speaking, please mute your mic. After each presenter, and there's going to be, I'm going to do a short presentation. Matt Scott, our district attorney, is going to do a short presentation. And Lauren Blackburn and Brian Mayhew is going to do a short presentation. So after each presenter, if you have questions, please feel free to ask your questions at that time. We are recording this meeting, and it will be posted on our YouTube channel afterwards. And if you'll go to our website, ncvision0.org/Robeson, you can view the video. Again, I just went over a few minutes ago our presenters. So I'm going to share some data with you from this year. And of course, our data is going to come from the Traffic Safety Unit of DOT's Mobility and Safety Division. Their engineers analyze the data and can make safety and traffic recommendations based on federal highway standards and DOT policies. While having data is very important, we are mindful that each statistic represents a life lost in our community. And of course, with our Vision Zero campaign, that's our whole purpose, is to save lives. You'll remember when we started before our 2018, we had 53 fatalities in 2017. We had 48 in 2018 and 43 in 2019. So we have a nice downward trajectory, and that's the way we want it. That's what we want to see. We made progress by working together and highlighting a major public safety issue for the county and deaths on our highway. That trend line is going down on this side, but as you'll see in the next slide, things are changing for us this year. So this slide shows a comparison of 2020 and 2019. And as you'll see in both in traffic deaths and fatal crashes from 19 to 20, we've went up. And we've not just went up, we went up pretty significantly. So through July of last year, we had 23 traffic deaths in the county. This year we have 36. We had 21 fatal crashes in 19 through July. This year we've had 31. So these numbers have increased very significantly, but we're not alone. Unfortunately, this trend is trending the same way, not only here in the county, but across the state and really across the nation. With the pandemic, especially starting in March, April, May, fewer vehicles on the highway, I guess folks felt like they could go faster. And speeding was definitely a problem in most of the deaths and crashes here in the county, but again, it's endemic for statewide and nationally. So it's just not unique to Robeson County. So if you look at this chart, it's just what we don't want to see. With our fatalities at 36 through July 31st, if you project those numbers out for the year, we'll end up with 61 deaths on our highways here in the county this year. And again, that's just not what we want to see, because this will actually be 8 more deaths than we had in 2017, which is the year before we started our task force. So hopefully these projections will be wrong, and we just won't get to that 61. This slide shows that we got our work cut out for us. We can't be complacent. Folks are dying in our county in crashes, and unfortunately, these deaths could be avoided. As you'll see in this slide, crashes when folks are not buckled up. In 19, we had 7 deaths. This year through July, we've got 15. Now the serious injuries are pretty much running about the same, 27 and 19 and 28 and 20 this year. So far this year, 41% of the folks who have died in highway crashes in our county were not wearing seat belts. The statewide average, though, is only 32. So we're 9 percentage points above the state average. And those crashes may also have involved other dangerous factors such as speeding. In fact, most of them did. So we got to just constantly remind folks just to buckle up. Every seat in the vehicle and for every trip. So we've got, with those statistics in mind, we have worked with the Communications Office of DOT to create 2 new social media campaigns. And we're unveiling them today. The first one on this slide, you'll see in 2019, 41% of the county's 39 fatal crashes involved speeding. If you'll look at the information that's kind of passing through, it talks about 69% of those crashes happened on our state roads. 18 happened on NC routes and US routes. And we just got to stop our speeding. I mean, speeding is killing folks on our highways. That's just the bottom line. The next social media message shows again that 41% of the fatal crashes involve speeding, and it's endangering everyone. Our law enforcement, our highway construction workers, folks that are riding with you and you in the vehicle, and other folks that are using the highways, whether they be pedestrians or in vehicles. It just involves our whole community. So hopefully we can have more positive trends later this year and change the trajectory that we are on now. Any questions? If there are not any questions, we'll go to our next speaker, and our next speaker is our District Attorney, Matt Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Grady. There's 2 programs that I would like to talk about today that the District Attorney's Office is working with our great partners on. The first is the Saved by the Belt seatbelt education program. This program began in September of 2019. The entity that's doing the heavy lifting on it is Southeastern Health. We're very appreciative of them. This program is geared towards addressing the problem that Mr. Grady talked about earlier, which is seat belts and individuals not buckling up. So with that, Southeastern Health has got a program, or put together a program, an education program with individuals that have pending seatbelt violations. If those individuals participate and pass the class, Southeastern Health provides the district attorney's office with those individuals' names, and their seatbelt tickets would get dismissed from that. It's a one-shot deal, so if you participated one time, passed it, and got another seatbelt ticket, then you're not able to go back the second time and take the class again. Since its inception in September of 2019, we've had 243 people, or since 243 people have passed since March. This obviously is a Governor's Highway Safety Program funded grant. Class is halted due to a lot of, well, like everything's done since March due to COVID. The classes were halted and it resumed on June 20th of 2020, but in a limited fashion. In June, when it started back, it had reduced class sizes, no more than 8 participants to make sure it follows the governor's rules on meetings, only 1 instructor per class, participant screening, temperature screens, and screening questions were implemented, social distancing was implemented in order to make sure we could get people into this class safely and get them through. On August 22nd of this month marked the 20th class. We have 2 classes upcoming. Southeastern has 2 classes upcoming, September 12th and September 26th. It's an easy registration process. When we see people in court, we provide them the information. There's also, as you can see on the right-hand side, rack cards were generated by the Governor's Highway Safety, which is put out. Because also we've had limited individuals come into court, we've had limited opportunities to direct people to our seatbelt program. We're gradually increasing the number of individuals that can come into the courthouse and the number of cases we can put on calendars. With that increase, we do anticipate forwarding additional people to the program, and the program numbers going up as we're trying to get through COVID. With regards to this program specialist, Southeastern had Ms. Skylar Pryor, program specialist. Good news there, she received her master's degree in counseling. The bad news there is that she had to relocate to Raleigh and resign from the program on July 31st. Mr. Philip Richardson is doing the heavy lifting now, community health manager, and assumed those responsibilities. As always, Southeastern is looking for instructors, especially those to teach the 2-hour class on weekdays and afternoons. And tentatively, this program has been tentatively approved to continue into the fiscal year 2021. So that's our seatbelt program. The next program I want to talk about is one that the DA's office has partnered with Robeson Community College on, and it's Robeson Community College's defensive driving courses. This was implemented because what we saw is we have a high number of, and I apologize, but somehow my screen is going and you don't have the slide. If we can hold 1 minute. There we go. So this was implemented because we saw a high number of individuals with speeding tickets. We also saw a high number of young drivers defined as 25 or under, getting speeding tickets. And Robeson County, I think the last stats was ranked in the top 10 in the state per capita with regards to young people fatalities on the road. So we wanted to try and put together a program to address those 2 issues in an effort to make our roads a lot safer. So with that, Robeson Community College created a defensive driving course, which is DDC4, as they call it, and that is for individuals over the age of 25. And they also created a second course called Alive at 25, which are those individuals under the age of 25. If they have speeding tickets, in our court system. Robeson Community College sends over an individual to our court. If we see that individuals have speeding tickets and would be good participants in this program, we forward them to RCC and they sign up and participate. There are 2 instructors in this course, both are State Highway Patrol officers, and they provide the instruction. On March 18th, like the seatbelt program, on March 18th, this program moved to the DDC-4, moved to an online platform. We were not able to move the Alive at 25 course to online platform, so that course stopped. But on March 18th, the DDC-4 moved to an online platform. From March 24th to July 20th, the program served 58 students online. Again, just like the seatbelt program, we have limited the number of cases, severely limited the number of cases that we're able to put on calendars since March to the present. Therefore, we've had limited opportunities to afford people to these programs, this one in particular. However, we do feel like once we're able to add additional cases on our calendar, those are additional people that we can forward to the Robeson County Community College Defensive Driving course. We plan on it, or Robeson Community College plans to move back to classroom participation in September of 2020. And so that's where we are with the Robeson County Defensive Driving course and the seatbelt program. 2 great programs we believe that we've partnered with, and 2 great organizations we believe with the District Attorney's Office is partnered with, which is Southeastern Health and Robeson Community College, in an effort to address 2 issues of grave concern, which is seatbelts and speeding on our roads. I would like to take a point of privilege. There's a 3rd program that we don't have a slide on, and that's our sobriety court. I just want to brief everybody on a success or 2 successes. We've had 2 individuals who we brought into our court based on what the court does is once they come in our program, they get a health assessment. They get a health screening. In the screening with these 2 individuals, they found out, the doctors told them that they had about 2 months to live if they continued on their path of drinking. And Robeson Healthcare was able to get them medical treatment with regards to those health issues. We were able to provide them treatment as far as the alcohol issues, and I safely say those 2 individuals are thriving in our sobriety court. And but for the sobriety court being available and an option, it's safe to say that those 2 individuals probably would not be alive today. So that is a great success story. We are appreciative of the Governor's Highway Safety Commission funding us on this, but I want to share that because what it shows is that there's real life impacts of these programs that we're putting forward through this Vision Zero, the Governor's Highway Safety, and everybody that should be proud of that because we're not only making our roads safer, but we're also changing lives. And with that, if there's not any questions or comments, that's all I have.
Thank you, Matt. And I just want to thank Matt for going in the direction of some of these alternate programs like the sobriety court, like the seatbelt classes, the defensive driving courses. These are all programs that give folks a second chance. And all of us need a second chance. I needed a lot of second chances. I don't know about everybody else, but I can speak for Grady and know that Grady needed second chances along the way. So I appreciate what you're doing, Matt. That's appreciate your efforts, appreciate your office's efforts, and just continue doing the good work. We talked yesterday for a bit on the defensive driving course, especially. And one of the things I'd like to see, and hopefully we can get funding for it. And I'm sure that some of the folks at the Governor's Highway Safety are on the call. And I really think with the defensive driving course, the next logical step is to actually have a course where folks can actually drive. And so I want to see us pursue that. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. I think everybody might have been muted there first. Are we back on? Jamil?
Yes, we're live. I was trying to make sure that all attendees could unmute themselves.
Okay. So Brian, Lauren, it's your show.
Hey, Grady,
Uh-huh.
because of the mute problem, you want to just make sure the attendees, do they have any other questions about you or Matt? Because I think they weren't able to unmute themselves. So we could just, I think now they can unmute themselves manually on and off. I don't know if Mark Azell may have had a comment or not.
Yes, I'm here and I'm now able to unmute myself, but I didn't, right as I think Grady was saying something about Governor's Highway Safety Program, I couldn't hear him anymore. So if there's any questions that you all have got for me, let me know.
So the only thing I was saying, Mark, appreciate all you've done for us. Appreciate all you've done for the county. And the only thing I was following up on is I just think it's really important to have a practical course, a practical part to the driving, defensive driving safety course. And I'd like not only to see the classroom work done, I'd like to see us have actually a driving course where folks get into vehicles and you know, be able to practice and drive. And I know that requires other funding, but I'm just advocating that for a continuation of that program through RCC.
Okay, well, thanks for that. We appreciate that. Yes, we'd have to look at other ways potentially to fund if we wanted to create a built environment. But then again, you know, there's plenty of different ways to look through that and utilize existing resources. It could be that there's something there in Robeson County that we could leverage. There are a bunch of different ways that we could approach that, but I'm excited about the programs that Matt talked about, including the driving program. And I'd love to talk with you further offline about ways to potentially make improve on that. I'm really excited about the seatbelt use work because statistically, we've seen previously that the seatbelt use rate, because that has been fairly low in Robeson County, has been a significant contributing factor. And even if you're driving impaired and even if you're speeding, if you've got that line of defense of a seatbelt, you're potentially going to either save your life or the crash will be less severe.
Thanks, Mark. And we will definitely have that discussion offline, because I think that's really, really important. And I think we can leverage other partners to help us with that.
I'd love to.
Brian, Lauren?
Here. All right. Definitely appreciate the opportunity to address the task force this morning. It's good to see that even with all the hurdles with COVID that we're still having these meetings. I think that's an important thing to continue the conversations that have been going for a while. I'm Brian Mayhew, State Traffic Safety Engineer. I've participated in a few of these meetings. With me today is Lauren Blackburn with VHB. Lauren, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Lauren Blackburn. I am with VHB, as Brian mentioned. I'm in our Raleigh office, or my home today, and very excited to be with you all today. So been working with Brian on a number of pedestrian safety studies, and really looking to work with you all over the next several months on improving pedestrian safety in Robeson County.
So we're going to go through some slides today from both a statewide and Robeson County perspective. But while we go through, of course, you'll have the opportunity to have questions and comments at the end. But if you can, for especially those in the task force that live in Robeson County and have probably lived there for quite some time, think back to yourself as a pedestrian in that county, of when you have been walking alongside the road with or without a sidewalk, or crossing the road at a location with crossing amenities such as crosswalks or pedestrian signal, or maybe locations without those amenities. Think of where you have had those concerns, if you've had any. Also think of yourself as a driver when you've been on the road and have seen pedestrians and have seen concerns or issues, and you'll have an opportunity toward the end to provide myself and Lauren some feedback and engage with us a little bit about this initiative. So while we go through that, just kind of keep those locations or spots that you're familiar with, in your mind as we go through. So pedestrian safety is a major focus area for NCDOT as a whole. And one of the reasons it's a major focus area is the trends are increasing. As you can see on this graph, pedestrian crashes, injuries, and fatalities have been increasing pretty steadily for some time now. In fact, in the last, since 2011, pedestrian fatalities are up by almost 70%. And they've really gone up significantly in the last few years. 2020, of course, is not yet complete, but it looks like the numbers are going to be even higher in 2020. So this is not just a Robeson County issue, this is statewide, and it is national. It is concentrated in the South and the Southeast. Typically outperforms other areas of the country in a not so great way. We typically have had a greater increase in pedestrian fatalities than other areas of the country. So that's why we're here. We need to continue to have discussions and to be able to do more than what we've been doing in the past. So a little bit about Robeson County. And I know this graph, it looks kind of messy. It is, because of the way that the data is. It's a fairly small amount of data, but the main thing here is Robeson County is going to, on most years, is going to experience between 40 and 50 pedestrian or bicycle crashes. Doesn't sound like a lot, but most of those crashes are going to result in an injury. And so you can have a small amount of crashes that contribute a much more significant amount in terms of serious injuries or fatalities. In fact, most of those crashes, are going to result in a serious injury or a moderate injury. You can see in 2019 there was 48 pedestrian bicycle crashes, and 41 of those resulted in death or injury. So that's one reason why these deserve additional focus, is because of that severity. As far as fatal pedestrian crashes, in the last 5 years, Robeson County averages about 8 deaths a year. So, that number may be smaller than some of the other numbers you've heard about in terms of lane departure or speeding or alcohol, but it's still another way that we need to be able to help drive the numbers down toward zero in this county and across the state. So if you think back to that first slide that had the increasing trend in North Carolina, then one thing about that trend to understand is that in recent years, almost all of that increase has been in urban areas. In fact, all of it has been in urban areas. Pedestrian fatalities do occur in rural areas as well, and they occur in significant numbers, including in Robeson County. But the increase in pedestrian fatalities and crashes is almost all in urban areas. And about 56% of the statewide pedestrian crashes occur in the 17 cities that you see on this map. You'll see we're using the term mid-size city and large city, and that's just kind of to distinguish between a city like a Fayetteville or a Lumberton, or a Charlotte or Salisbury, understanding that there's significant differences between the size of those cities. And you'll see that Lumberton is on this map in a different color along with Salisbury and Hendersonville. That's because Lumberton, as we'll talk about more in a few minutes, is part of one of our initial pedestrian safety focus areas to bring additional resources to those cities. Why is Lumberton on this map? The main reason is because when we consider population, these cities are showing an overrepresentation. So they're having a little bit more crashes or fatalities or serious injuries than what you would expect for a city of that size in terms of population. So just a little bit about the Pedestrian Safety Initiative, and then I will turn this over to Lauren to provide more information. But one thing I wanted to point out is as we do this initiative in Robeson County, it's going to primarily focus on Lumberton and Pembroke. And those are the two cities, because when we looked at the data for the county, those two cities seem to have concentrations of pedestrian crashes, as well as a lot of opportunities. We believe both cities will be on board and easy for us to work with, and that will probably help generate a lot of recommendations that we can consider as we move forward. Part of this will be data driven. We will consider crash data as well as other sets of data. Risk, speed is a big factor. There's a lot of other things that contribute to pedestrian crashes. Many of them occur on wider facilities, higher speed facilities. Many of them occur at night. So we'll take all those things into consideration as we go through this process. We do recognize that there are a decent number of rural pedestrian crashes in Robeson County as a whole, and we'll look for an opportunity along the way. We won't be able to focus on those in great detail, and I'll be honest, rural pedestrian crashes are difficult to treat from an engineering program. However, we will look for an opportunity maybe to have some initial discussions, either with this task force or others within the county, about what some of those challenges might be, just so that we can come away with a better understanding of those issues. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lauren.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to talk very high level about 3 basic steps that we are proposing to walk through with communities like Lumberton and Pembroke to learn more about what the current pedestrian safety concerns are in those communities, and ultimately to develop recommendations for how we can deploy, especially on the engineering side, but really looking at all the strategies that could best address pedestrian safety in these communities. So it is a fairly simple process. There's a lot of incremental steps along the way, but we'll give you guys an overview of that today. So the first step is really kind of working with the communities to develop a scope and a process. So we do have a general process in mind. It will follow a data-driven process, but we need to learn more from the communities about what makes their their locality unique, what the concerns are, as Brian asked those questions earlier, thinking about where are pedestrians currently walking, crossing, what are some of the safety concerns that have been expressed or noticed in the past. So these are questions we want to ask the communities. We certainly want to hear from you all, people who are familiar with the communities. That's what we need to learn from in the beginning. We also want to learn more perspective from them about what they're already doing to further pedestrian safety. Maybe they have a plan and process for sidewalks, which is different than what we will be working on in this initiative, but it does dovetail, it helps complement some of that work. And then we also want to work with the communities to learn more about who needs to be involved in the process moving forward, not just from a day-to-day check-in, but also what voices need to be listened to, where who may have some of the best insights to share. So we'll be working on that in the early stages of this process, and that's where we are. And so part of that is listening, learning more about the communities, learning more about what is on the ground, and we'll be looking at things like where there are predominant pedestrian activity areas, for example. So the photo in the upper left, if you're familiar with Lumberton, you may know this trail. There's a great trail system that goes through Lumberton or follows the river, connects and crosses several roads. So the trail is part of the community, but we are also going to be looking very carefully at places like where this trail crosses some major roadways in Lumberton. And sometimes that reveals itself in where crashes have occurred, sometimes it doesn't, but we want to look at and listen to what the communities are telling us. The map in the lower right is just an example of where some of the crashes have been concentrated historically. It's just to start that conversation, and we need to learn a lot more. So that's why we need to get into a lot more analysis as well. The data, the crash data is going to be a really important piece, but we also need to learn more about other data. Maybe the towns or the cities have some information to share that can help inform this. We'll be looking at data that describes risk, where pedestrian crashes may occur based on conditions like speed, width of the roadway, where pedestrians are likely to be crossing. So it may or may not line up with where a crash has occurred, but they do describe locations where it can occur. So we'll be looking at that data as well. Also, we'll be looking for information about how the cities want to work with us to make decisions, to consider some of the recommendations. And then ultimately, it's just helping us prioritize locations. So Lumberton and Pembroke and the county are very large areas. So we'll be really working at the early stages with the communities to understand where should we start? Where are some of the priority locations that we need to investigate more deeply, field reviews and things like that. And field reviews can tell us a lot. So after we understand more about where we need to focus some of our initial priority and energy, we may try to do something like what we've done in other parts of your region. These are some photos and a map from a study that we did with Division 6 in Spring Lake. This was near along a multi-mile corridor along NC24. We looked at intersections, we walked the corridor, we looked for evidence of where people had walked. So we may see some worn paths like you see in this photo. And then we're also looking at just overall observations of how traffic and pedestrians interact. So our field review may look different than what we would normally do in the past, where there may be, in the past, we would have larger groups of people to be able to do that together. We're going to look at maybe some alternative ways to do that in smaller groups, or maybe even phone call interviews with particular stakeholders to learn more about what they see on the ground. And of course, what we're trying to get to is recommendations. So the field review, the data, the information we gather from the towns and the cities will help inform the priorities, some ideas that might be developed into what we call countermeasures, and then we'll develop that further into some implementation strategies. So looking at timing, who can implement what partnerships could be formed to get some of those improvements on the ground as quickly as possible. And that's going to take a lot of collaboration. And recommendations and countermeasures might look something like what has been implemented on Cedar Creek Road in Fayetteville. These rectangular rapid flashing beacons, I'm not sure if you've noticed these before, but there's several of them along Cedar Creek Road. They have helped improve crossing visibility for pedestrians across multiple locations on that corridor. So it's just an example of one type of treatment that we might consider, especially at unsignalized locations. There's a lot other tools and options that we'll also be looking at. And of course, we'll also be looking at signalized intersections as well. But these are just examples of things that we might consider for Robeson County. So this is where we are in the process. We're at the beginning stages. We're collecting information. We're going to begin outreach to the cities and to other stakeholders in the region. We've done some initial field review. There will be more of that likely in the early mid-fall, and then we'll start looking at data to analyze conditions and develop recommendations. So that's where we are in the process. Really looking forward to seeing what we can learn for this community, and it'll take several months to really kind of work through those recommendations and meetings with you all and other stakeholders. So I think with that, Brian, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. We can certainly take questions.
No, I think you did a thorough job of covering the initiative, but certainly if there are any questions from anybody with us today, we'd love to get any feedback, or if you have any observations you'd care to share with us. All right, hearing none, then
Brian, Lauren, I do have one question. This is Cheryl with Governor's Highway Safety. Are you aware, Lauren, of any comparable project that may be going on in the country that has the geographics or dynamics that Robeson County has, that we could visit, and not physically visit, but virtually visit, and see how they are working their plan?
That is a great question, Cheryl. To be honest, there are not that many great examples of initiatives like what we're talking about for Robeson County for a few reasons. Most of the emphasis for pedestrian safety improvements has really been in the larger cities, very urban areas. So we don't have a lot of great examples in more rural communities or even mid-sized cities. So I will say North Carolina DOT is really at the forefront on this conversation. I do work in a lot of states across the country. I do a lot of work with Federal Highway Administration on this topic, but I will be looking out for that. A couple in the northern parts of the country might be semi-related examples. Wisconsin and Minnesota do a lot more work in rural areas, but we'll look into that. That's a great question.
Good. Good. Well, I knew you had a lot of insight across the country, and your expertise certainly lends it. And we're very fortunate to have you part of that team to investigate and look at different things and ideas across Robeson County and how we can improve pedestrian safety. And I would encourage everyone listening on this platform, as well as those in the community, to share ideas and thoughts about where their struggles are, where their concerns are, and how they might suggest in making things better. Okay, any more questions for Brian and Lauren? All right, if not, then we'll go to the next part of our agenda. So I'll tell you what, let's do this. Jamil, if you will put all the presenters back up and
Cheryl,
let's just,
Cheryl, Brian needs to go next.
Hey,
oh, okay.
yep, I'm, you
Oh,
can't get
okay.
ry of me. You can't get rid of me that quickly today,
Oh, I'm
Cheryl.
so sorry. Go right ahead.
No, you're fine. I do, I appreciate your question to tail end of the pedestrian one as well. And we are very fortunate to be able to work with Lauren on this project. I will say that we often find ourselves in North Carolina DOT trying to lead in certain areas, and I think that that's going to be the case in pedestrian safety for these small to mid-sized cities as well. We're intentionally trying to create space and do things differently and look at things from different perspectives in order to gain traction in what's historically been a pretty tough area. So I definitely appreciate your comment. So curve signing, definitely a big change from pedestrian safety. Now we're talking much more about lane departure. And there we go. So with lane departure crashes, and this task force has heard a lot about lane departure crashes. And one reason you've probably heard this term before is it's a very common crash in Robeson County. It's a very common crash type throughout all rural areas in North Carolina. It also overlaps a lot with drivers or people in vehicles that are not wearing seatbelts. It overlaps a lot with speed, overlaps a lot with alcohol. All of those contribute significantly to lane departure crashes. But a lane departure crash is just like what it sounds. It's when that vehicle leaves its lane. It can be a head-on crash. It can be where it ran off the road, hit trees or in ditches. Those are very common. And if people are speeding or under the influence of alcohol, then the likelihood of a lane departure crash goes way up. If you're not wearing a seatbelt, the likelihood of death goes way up. So that's where all of this comes together. So the better we can do to keep people sober and at a reasonable speed and in their lane, both with engineering and enforcement and behavior and education type programs, then we should be able to see these numbers go down. Lane departure crashes are only about 20% of all crashes. So not a huge number, but they're over 50% of the fatalities and serious injuries. So think about that, 20% of the crashes, but way over 50% of the fatalities and serious injuries. So when they occur, a lot like pedestrian crashes, when they occur, the results are not always very beneficial to the people involved. Most of them are rural. Almost 60% of lane departure crashes occur in rural areas. Robeson County has a lot of rural space, a lot of roads in Robeson County, a lot of those two-lane rural roads. So about 75% of the fatalities and serious injuries occur in rural areas. And so that's something to keep in mind as we go through. So why Robeson County? Robeson County is overrepresented in lane departure fatal crashes. In fact, southeastern North Carolina is overrepresented. Robeson County by itself had over 123 fatal crashes, fatal lane departure crashes between 2012 and 2016. I apologize that I haven't updated the data on this slide, but I can tell you that it's the same. It's telling the same story. In fact, Robeson County is making up about 3.5% of the state's lane departure fatal crashes, just that one county alone. So it is definitely an issue that we're going to continue to work on time and time again. Which brings us a little bit more to this project that I'm going to brief you on today. Most lane departure crashes occur at curves. That should make sense to most of us as drivers. When you approach a curve, you have some decisions to make. Do you need to slow down? Do you need to pay attention? Do you need to keep your eyes off your cell phone? Do you need to pay attention to the signs that are there? What are other drivers doing? There's more decisions that the brain has to make when you're going through a curve than on a straight section of road. So curves are always a focus. We've identified 27 sections of roadway with over 200 curves and throughout Robeson County, pretty much spread throughout the county. The project is going to look closely at those 27 sections and those 200 curves. We'll be looking at various sorts of data, and we'll be doing field investigations at each one of those. We do have a private engineering firm that's helping us investigate these locations. It is a good bit of work to do so. There's also, as you'd expect, a lot of coordination is taking place with both my staff and then also with Division 6 staff as well. Recommendations are reviewed monthly so we can come to consensus on what changes may be needed at those curves. So what would you see if we make changes at a curve? For most of you, it's going to blend in with types of signs that you're already familiar with. The signs you see on the slide include chevrons and warning signs and speed advisories. So all of those are part of this project on getting the right sign at the right location. In many cases, the curve may already be signed and it might be in need of additional maintenance. And then also, in some cases, by investigating the curve, we will realize that the speed limit for the road might not be set in the best way or the best speed for that location. And so there might be adjustments being made to speed limits as well. So here's the thing about signs. You see them all the time. If you think about the road that you drive on from your home to work or to the grocery store or whatever we do now in the current COVID situation, but you probably can't remember the signs that you see when you drive. They're gone to you. You don't see them. As a general rule, signs are not a good, effective solution to most safety issues. One of the exceptions that we see with doing our own internal data and research is curve signing. There's still going to be people who drive the road every day that are going to often ignore the signs, but they often have driven the road enough where they have a good feel for what their speed should be through a curve. But you do have a lot of other drivers that it might be their first time on the road, they might be less familiar with it. And so we do have evidence that chevron signing in particular and a properly signed curve can make a big difference in lane departure crashes. We should expect reductions between 30 and 40% of lane departure crashes at these curves. One thing I want to mention is one thing we're doing on this project is we're looking at the route. So we're looking at the individual curves, but we don't want to treat one curve and then that just moves the crash problem to the next curve on the road. So we are looking at the route as a whole and not just an individual curve in isolation without considering the route. So we think by doing so, we can see a reduction. Unfortunately, some of these curves, the signing won't be enough. We've learned over time that some of these will need additional work than signing, and so they'll be monitored over time, and additional work may be done in the future at some of these locations. So this is underway. It started in April and we've completed about 50% of the routes, and we look to have the rest of the investigations complete in November. As far as what happens after that, it'll go through a rather typical normal process of where the recommendations for signing changes will compete for funding. They will be considered for funding, and once funding is found for the signing upgrades, then the work can be scheduled and implemented. But there's no specific timetable on when that's going to take place. But clearly, we hope to do that sooner than later, sometime next year. But we don't, until we're done with the investigations and we can figure out what's needed, then there's not a specific schedule today for when those signs will be implemented. So that's it for curve signing and lane departure crashes. If anybody has any questions for me, I'll be more than glad to take them.
Brian, this is Andrew Barksdale. Great presentation. I wanted to ask you, I've heard it you know, I'm of course not an engineer, but I've heard it said that sometimes engineers put, you know, gentle curves in roads sometimes so drivers don't fall asleep and get bored. Can you kind of explain how that works and how that's different here?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a myth, at least in the southeastern part of the U.S. That does not really take place much in this part of the country, because most of our roads, almost all of our roads, are farm to market roads, especially where lane departure crashes are occurring. So they've been around for years and years and decades, and in some cases probably hundreds of years. They're pathways that became gravel roads that eventually became paved. And that's what we've inherited as our roadway system, our rural roadway system. And so there was not a lot of design, there was not a lot of thought put into, let's place a curve here to wake drivers up. That's not something that's done very much in North Carolina, especially on these type of roads. Where you've probably heard that is in the Midwest. Think of Iowa with the cornfields and certain states like that. There has been some of that done in the past to kind of break up the monotony and to change the driver perspective. But I'm not aware of it having really any safety benefit either.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
So Brian, this is Cheryl Leonard, Governor's Highway Safety. So what kind of cost would this promote, and I guess in the long run? Is it based on the cost effectiveness, certainly, of lives saved? You know, every life saved obviously is a good way to spend your money. But what kind of cost, knowing that, you know, there's economic issues across the country right now, and certainly in North Carolina, how is that going to weigh in?
So when you're using the word cost, are you in part asking how much it may take in terms of funding to treat a curve? Is that part of what you're asking?
Well, that and putting the signage up and educating the public, just kind of an over-ending effect of how this is going to resonate.
Yeah, so it can. It would be difficult for me to get into any specifics on this on this initiative, but in general, it can be a few hundred to a few $1,000s to properly sign a curve, just depending on how many signs are needed. And it will also, there will have to be a decision made on who's installing the signs, whether that's state forces or contract forces. That can affect schedule and cost. So that's, you're right, there's economic issues facing the state. Funding is tight, funding is limited, but I will say that in general, signing this type of signing, when you consider the potential benefits versus the relatively low cost, I'm hopeful that it's something that we'll be able to move forward when there's an opportunity.
Excellent. And absolutely a great presentation, and something that I'm sure many have thought about over in the past, but now that you've really put it out there as a plan to do, is going to be quite beneficial, certainly to those that are taking curves at speeds that probably shouldn't be taking it, and just kind of a forewarning to slow down and be aware of what's coming up.
And one thing I'll mention, this is one of the first times that we have intentionally looked at almost all roads within a county as part of one project. We're not visiting all roads in the county, but we looked with data and crash data. We looked at all roads in Robeson County. We selected some that are kind of at the higher end of the spectrum for lane departure crashes, and then work to kind of zoom in a little bit on these routes for locations that seem to be have a lot more potential for benefit. So I will tell you from our program, I know it's just signs and all that, but we believe that there can be some benefit to taking kind of a broad view of the county and parts of the county and treating many curves at once. We think that the potential benefit is probably greater when we take that approach.
And this is in reference to the Rural Roads project that was done a couple of years ago. Some of the insight that was provided about some of the roads that were looked at. So is this also in combination with that?
This is a completely separate initiative than the Rural Roads program, but certainly there's overlap because in that Rural Roads effort, we looked at 2 corridors in Robeson County, and certainly lane departure crashes were absolutely a big part of that effort as well. But there's no direct overlap.
Okay, great. All right, does anyone else have any more questions or comments about Brian and Lauren's presentation? Okay, so now, Jamal, if you'll place everybody back up, all the presenters.
Or the presenters, I think, can just turn on their cameras, like Grady, Matt.
And Matt. Okay, so does anybody have any questions specifically for Grady or Matt or Lauren, Brian, regarding any of their presentations? Okay, so thank you, lady and gentlemen, for very educational presentations talking about a number of things that I think are going to all be beneficial to North Carolina, Robeson County specifically. We all on the task force are looking for ways to identify traffic safety issues, and certainly each one of these presentations have given us some insight on how each one of us can identify and work towards looking at reducing traffic crashes and giving the highlights that Grady gave, looking at how we can become involved in some of the traffic safety initiatives and the driving initiatives that Matthew talked about. I do want to highlight the September 12th and I think September 26th Say by the Belt safety courses that the district attorney noted. Also the driving defense course I think was going to start back up March 24th, I believe.
Cheryl, it's already started back online. It's going to hopefully start back in person in September.
September 26th.
Yeah, and if I can address something Grady brought up about a driving portion component to that.
Yes.
Mr. Jamie Collins with the Robeson Community College has been the heavy lifter on this program as far as putting the program together and getting it implemented. Part of the vision or the future for it is implementing a driving portion. But I think we wanted to see what participants we would have, how many participants we'd have, the interest in it to justify Robeson Community College potentially putting that capital investment in or seeking funding to put that capital investment in. I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew that is something that we're looking at for the future.
Excellent.
And also, I see Jamie Collins is one of the attendees. If that person wants to chime in, they don't have to see that they're able.
Yeah, just to echo what Matt said, excellent opportunity. We do have some grounds that we can currently use that we're currently using with one of our programs with our law enforcement, the driving grounds. So we'll be looking at trying to position that forward and making it go forward with what Brady's aspect is, putting a student behind the wheel and giving them hands-on experience. So we are looking at that.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. And also just to remind everybody about the online class, you go to srmc.org, and that will be an online registration for the Saved by the Belt program. Also, thank you, Brian and Lauren, for your insight in how addressing crashes and curves with signage improvement, and certainly improving pedestrian safety in Lumberton and Pembroke. One of the things that we have been doing across the different meetings is having some what we call traffic talks, and some highlighting of different initiatives that are ongoing in Robeson County, things that we might not hear about unless we're in this type of forum. So we're encouraging participants on the Vision Zero Task Force membership to volunteer to come in and talk about 5 minutes about what they're doing in the county, and how those initiatives may parallel or overlap some of the things we've talked about today, and how important those ongoing initiatives are toward the achievement of, and to use Matthew's words, real life impacts, and how we are changing lives by doing all that we are doing in all Robeson County is doing in the past few years. And so we, as Grady has mentioned previously, we still have a lot of work to do on these initiatives, and the group will continue to do that and succeed at that. And so the next meeting I believe we have scheduled will be October 29th. And as mentioned previously, it may end up not having the crystal ball on what's going to happen between now and October. We may end up doing a virtual meeting again. Would you say, Grady?
Very well made. And that's because of the dynamics of the virtual meeting. We didn't approve our minutes from our January meeting, so probably going to hold off on doing any of that because of the roll call element and all that until we meet live again.
Okay.
And then Cheryl, I think you'll also want to inform people about the distance floor sticker project that's happening.
Mark, if you'd like to, go right ahead.
I'm happy to.
Okay,
one of
you.
the things that we are doing across selected counties in North Carolina is partnering with grocery stores, convenience stores, and pharmacies in specific counties to have these distance floor stickers labeled with safe driving messages. And one of the counties where we want to do this is in Robeson County. So we hope to start this around the 1st of September, still working out some logistics. We're going to use the Don't Rob Robeson sticker and logo that you've already got on the bus route. Use that on those distance floor stickers. So when you go into a Food Lion, you're sort of captive there anyway, and you got to stand 6 feet away from folks, and that will have that logo there. So our hope is that project is going to run from about September 1st to the end of the year. And that'll be one additional way to get the seatbelt use messaging out in that county. We're also doing it in a number of other counties as well. And there's some counties where we're doing an impaired driving prevention message as well. So we're going to see how this works. It's an odd opportunity for us to advertise the messaging and kind of turn a lemon into lemonade with COVID. So that's exciting. And if you see that in the county, you'll know why.
Thank you, Mark. And that was Mark Uzell with the Governor's Highway Safety, the director of the Governor's Highway Safety Program. There's a lot of interesting things going on in North Carolina and through the Governor's Highway Safety and the funding that they're able to provide. So we're very glad that we can assist counties like Robeson County as well. On your agenda, there are two websites for the Vision Zero videos that are available for you to take a look at. One deals with anti-drunk driving video and another one with a seatbelt video. So please take an opportunity to go to those websites and look at that. I think you'll find them very interesting and very useful. You will find them on YouTube. And you might be able to use those in some of your individual presentations and other opportunities where you're speaking about different issues of traffic safety in North Carolina, in Robeson County. Are there any other questions that might be out there?
Looks like Pauline has a question. I see if Pauline
Yes.
can, see if I can unmute her or something.
Okay.
Pauline, can you hear us? Are you able to
Yes.
speak?
Yes. Good morning. This has nothing to do with any of the presentations that has been presented, but I do want to know, do we have data on the cell phone usage during these crashes that were involved doing these crashes?
That'd be like distracted driving. That'd be like a distracted driving category.
Right.
Let me do some investigation. Mark, do you know of any data that might be on cell phone usage involved in crashes?
One of the things that Brian mentioned earlier, I think it was Brian that mentioned it, is we receive a fatal slip report from from DOT a couple of times a week. And that includes a summary of the fatalities and some of the things involved in the fatalities. And there will be some of them that may mention cell phone use, but not all of them will. It's a difficult thing to get data on because, for one, when you're in a crash, and especially if there's a fatality involved, it's hard to really know if that was what precipitated or caused the crash. You know, the presence of a cell phone by itself doesn't tell you that. And then you've got the other issue that if there's somebody who was talking on the cell phone, they survived the crash, they may not really remember that because they're so dazed after the crash occurred. So it is a very good question, and it is really a difficult thing for us to tease out. We've also got a state law in North Carolina that's fairly weak about cell phone use in driving. The state law just prohibits texting while driving. It prohibits cell phone use for those under the age of 18, but texting while driving for the rest of us, which doesn't include other things that one might do on the phone. So there's talk about strengthening that law next year and having the General Assembly look at a much stronger hands-free law. Of course, if you're hands-free, that's a little bit better, but you can still be distracted. So it's a tough one. That's a long way of saying no. I don't think we got a lot of data to really show on that. But I can look through some of those individual reports and see if they do mention the cell phone use in some cases.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mark, this is Cheryl. This is Brian, and we routinely get asked for data summaries related to distracted driving, and we can forward along the most recent summaries that we've put together for the state, and we can see if it's specific at the county level. I'm sure we can pull that together. But to follow up on what Mark was saying, the data is really incomplete. So most people involved in crashes will not willingly tell a police officer that they were distracted, and they will not willingly say that they were on the cell phone. So The officer has to use their judgment, and it's hard for them to say something on a crash report that they're not sure if it's true or not. So it's very spotty data.
Okay, good question. And thank you very much, Pauline, for that. Anything else from the group? Any other comments? Okay, if not, then thank you all. Thank you all for attending. Thank each of the presenters for being here and taking time to shed a great amount of knowledge about particular areas of interest. And we will see you again on October 29th. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank